New York City, a place that celebrates freedom yet often tests the ones who reach for it. A city that calls itself a beacon for the world, but where the path to leadership is paved with resistance, ambition, and unrelenting struggle. In this city, where power is measured in influence and wealth, one man from Queens decided to challenge that system. His name, Zohran Mamdani. His mission, to change how politics looks, sounds, and serves. This is his story of struggle, doubt, faith, and the unshakable will to lead. Zohran's life began far from the symbols of power that would one day define his journey. Born to immigrant parents, his father, an Indian scholar, and his mother, a Ugandan filmmaker, he grew up surrounded by stories of displacement, perseverance, and hope. Queens, his home borough, was his world, a place where languages mixed like the city's skyline, and where every block carried a story of migration. But behind that beauty, there was hardship. His parents worked tirelessly to provide him an education, even when opportunities were scarce. They taught him that dignity doesn't come from titles, it comes from service. As a young man, Zohran began to see how injustice shaped the lives of his neighbors. He watched cab drivers work 18-hour days and still fall into debt, their dreams crushed by predatory loans and a system that didn't care. He saw tenants forced from their homes by landlords who valued profit over people. He saw entire neighborhoods forgotten by City Hall. These weren't stories in newspapers, they were people he knew by name. That pain, quietly stored in his heart, became the foundation of his purpose. He didn't begin as a politician. He began as a counselor, an activist, a community worker. For years, he worked with housing organizations and taxi unions, helping those who had been left behind. He wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing fairness. But in New York, fairness doesn't come easy. The deeper he went, the more he saw the machine behind the curtain, the political establishment that served power before people. And so, in his late 20s, he made a decision that would change everything: he would run for office. It was a decision many called foolish. Friends warned him about how politics eats idealists alive. Even some in his own community doubted he could win. A Muslim socialist, they said. New York will never elect someone like you. But Zohran didn't listen. He believed in the impossible because he lived it every day. The first struggle came with visibility. The system was designed for insiders, not outsiders. His name wasn't famous, his donors weren't wealthy, and his campaign headquarters was a borrowed community hall. He printed posters with borrowed money, walked the streets himself, and spoke directly to voters. While other candidates hired PR teams, he relied on conversation. His first few rallies were small, a few dozen people, mostly neighbors, students, and taxi drivers. But something in his words connected with them. He didn't speak like a politician. He spoke like one of them. Then came the wave of hate. The internet lit up with racist remarks. A Muslim can't run New York. He'll bring Sharia to the city. Go back to where you came from. Anonymous messages filled his inbox. One day, a campaign poster was defaced with slurs. Another day, a volunteer was harassed while handing out flyers. For many, such hate would have been reason enough to quit. But Zohran turned the hate into fuel. If they fear change, he said, then we must be close to making it happen. The political establishment didn't make it easier. Party insiders ignored him, refusing to endorse his campaign. Donors refused to take meetings. Even some media outlets chose not to cover him, treating his candidacy like a long shot. But he found allies among the people. Taxi drivers volunteered their time. Shopkeepers handed out flyers. Students created social media campaigns. Slowly, a grassroots movement began to form. It wasn't built on money, it was built on belief. Still, every day was a battle. He had to fight misinformation that painted him as radical, un-American, or too religious. Debates turned ugly, with opponents questioning his loyalty to the country. One opponent even implied he could be a security threat because of his background. It was not just political resistance, it was personal. He received threats that made his family worry. At times, the weight of it all became unbearable. Late at night, he would sit by his campaign window, staring at the skyline, wondering if it was all worth it. But then he would remember the taxi driver who cried while thanking him, or the tenant who kept her home because of his advocacy. Their faith in him became his shield. As the campaign gained momentum, Zohran's ideas started to spread: affordable housing, justice for workers, education for all. People began to see not a Muslim candidate, but a voice of integrity. His rallies grew larger, more diverse. Reporters began to show up. Yet, even then, the pressure intensified. Powerful developers and political figures launched smear campaigns. They accused him of being anti-business and divisive. Some even tried to use his religion as a political weapon. But Zohran never responded with anger. He stayed calm, grounded, and consistent. His speeches were never about himself, they were about the city's forgotten people. As election day approached, his team had no illusions. They were outspent, outnumbered, and underestimated. But what they had couldn't be bought: trust. On the night of the election, as votes were counted, tension filled the air. Hours passed. The numbers tightened. Then, just before midnight, the impossible became reality: Zohran Mamdani had won. The room erupted in disbelief and joy. Taxi drivers cried. Volunteers hugged. Reporters scrambled to rewrite their headlines. Against all odds, the son of immigrants, the Muslim kid from Queens, had made history. But the struggle didn't end with victory. Becoming mayor of New York meant stepping into one of the toughest jobs in the world. From day one, he faced resistance. City bureaucrats doubted him. The establishment quietly hoped he would fail. The same papers that ignored him now dissected his every move. Critics said his policies were too idealistic. Lobbyists tried to water down his reforms. When he pushed for affordable housing, they said he was hurting real estate. When he called for police reform, they called him anti-law enforcement. Every proposal became a battlefield. Behind the scenes, the pressure was immense. Endless meetings, late-night strategy sessions, constant media scrutiny, and through it all, he had to stay calm. Some days, exhaustion set in so deeply he barely slept. Yet, each morning, he reminded himself why he was there. He wasn't serving power, he was serving people. When others shut their doors, he opened his. When critics shouted, he listened. When cynics doubted, he worked. The hate never completely disappeared. Anonymous threats still arrived. Conspiracy theories still spread. But for every voice of hate, there were hundreds of voices of hope, from the schoolchildren who wrote him letters, to the workers who thanked him for believing in them. Those moments made every struggle worth it. Even within his administration, challenges arose. Some advisors urged him to compromise, to play politics like everyone else. But Zohran refused to betray his principles. "If I start acting like them," he once said, "then why did we fight to get here?" His courage often isolated him, but it also earned him respect. Slowly, even his critics began to admit that he led with honesty, something rare in the halls of power. His journey became more than a personal triumph, it became a mirror for America. It revealed both the prejudice that still existed and the progress that was possible. He showed that leadership could come from the margins, that faith could coexist with governance, and that empathy could triumph over cynicism. Zohran often spoke about how his struggle was not unique. "Every person who dares to dream in this city struggles," he said. "Mine just happened to be public." His story inspired a generation, not just Muslims, but anyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. He became a symbol of resistance for those who believed politics could still serve people. In the end, his story is the story of New York itself, diverse, defiant, unstoppable. A city that challenges, breaks, and rebuilds you, just like it did him. His struggle was long, his journey uncertain, but through it all, he never forgot why he started. He didn't fight to be the first Muslim mayor. He fought so that one day, being Muslim, being different, or being from Queens would no longer be extraordinary. And that is the legacy of Zohran Mamdani, not the victory, but the struggle that made it possible.